He opened the old envelope, and there it was, the trembling handwriting of his father. His father had been gone for years, yet this letter had never been read. The attic held its breath. Outside the narrow window, the last pale gold of evening slipped through the cracks, scattering dust into drifting ribbons like fog. On the old wooden desk, the envelope lay, waiting, its edges frayed. The paper yellowed as if time itself had seeped into every fiber. In the corner, a blot of faded purple ink had bled across the surface like a tear that once fell and never fully dried. The son sat motionless. His hand trembled as his fingers brushed across that familiar script, his father's writing, bold aligned yet faintly unsteady, as if a weary man had poured the last of himself into these final lines. His heartbeat thundered, each pulse pounding against his ribs like a drum roll before something about to erupt. The room drowned in silence, broken only by the slow, deliberate ticking of the wall clock. Each tick pulled him deeper into a suffocating tension. He remembered clearly his father had died more than 10 years ago. At the funeral, no one spoke of a letter. No farewell note, no parting words. And now here it was, a letter that had somehow surfaced in this forgotten attic. He swallowed hard. Inside him, feelings collided: confusion, anger, and a shadow of fear. Anger that his father had never spoken a word of love while alive. Confusion at the existence of this hidden letter. Fear of what it might contain. Was it a belated reproach? Or a secret powerful enough to change the course of his life? His fingertip traced the brittle seam of the envelope. The glue had nearly given way. A single stroke of a letter opener would reveal it all. But he hesitated, his chest tight, his breath ragged. To open it meant facing the truth. To leave it sealed meant burying it forever, never knowing what his father had wanted to say. The desk lamp flickered, casting a wavering light across the desk. His shadow stretched, long and unsteady, pulsing with his frantic heartbeat. On the envelope, the letter seemed to shimmer, whispering, "My son." He closed his eyes. In that instant, memories surged, the image of a tall, stern man, eyes always cold, voice always gravelly, never gentle. His childhood was built on silent dinners, lessons taught with harshness, no embraces, no words of praise. And then one day his father was gone, taking with him everything unsaid. So why, here now in this attic, was there a letter? He opened his eyes and stared at it. Questions carved into his mind. Why had his father written this? Why was it never delivered? Who kept it hidden all these years, and why had it only appeared now? A sudden gust rattled the window, making the old curtain sway as light and shadow clashed against the wall. The whole room seemed to whisper answers, yet none could be grasped. He clutched the letter tighter, the paper brittle and dry, yet heavy with the weight of 1,000 memories. At that moment he sat at a crossroads. One path led to the fear of facing the past, the other to the burning need to know the truth. Truth that could shatter him or set him free. The attic fell silent again, save for the wind shrieking through the cracks and his heart hammering against his chest. His breath came hot and uneven, merging with the darkness spilling in through the small window. The letter lay in his hand, silent and heavy, like a soul waiting to be released. He set the envelope on the desk, buried his face in his hands, and closed his eyes. The pain of the past, the loss that never healed, crashed back over him like a storm. Yet within that storm flickered a fragile spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, inside lay the words of love he had waited his entire life to hear. The clock on the wall suddenly chimed its long note, echoing through the attic. Time itself seemed to pause. The young man drew in a breath, hand trembling as it touched the edge of the envelope once more. And in that suspended moment, the question that echoed in his mind was the same question that struck the hearts of everyone watching. His father has been gone for so long. So why is this letter still here? And what secret inside could change his life forever? Daniel was 28 years old. At an age when most of his peers had families, steady jobs, some even owning homes and raising children, he was still living in a shabby apartment on the outskirts of town, drowning in overdue bills and a life with no direction. He worked anything he could find, waiting tables at a cafe, delivering packages at night, short-term office jobs without contracts. Yet he never stayed in one place long, as if some invisible hand kept pulling him back, never letting him settle. His gaunt face carried the weight of exhaustion, his eyes shadowed by permanent dark circles like two stains of night that never left him. Each morning, staring into the bathroom mirror, he saw a stranger, disheveled hair, dull eyes, and no spark of youth left. He often asked himself, what am I even living for? Am I on the right path at all? But the answers never came. Deep down, Daniel knew the reason lay in the scars of his childhood. His father, a man who had once served in the military, was remembered in the family as cold and unyielding. In the small house where Daniel grew up, silence always ruled. His father spoke little, and when he did, his words were curt, clipped like commands. No hugs in the morning, no goodnight wishes at night, and certainly no evenings of father and son talking side by side. Daniel remembered vividly when he was 10. He once brought home a crayon drawing of their family father, smiling, mother gentle, and little Daniel holding his father's hand. He gave it to his dad, hoping for praise or at least a nod of approval. But his father only glanced at it, set it on the table, and said nothing. That cold dismissal, that feeling of being unseen, followed Daniel all the way into adulthood. His teenage years were a string of failed attempts to earn his father's approval. He studied hard, tried sports, joined activities, anything to make his father smile. But it never worked. The stern face, the steel-hard eyes, never softened. And when his father died suddenly in an accident, Daniel had still never once heard the words, "I love you, son." The death left an aching void. His mother, broken by grief, eventually moved away to start over. Daniel stayed behind, growing up within those crumbling walls, trapped in loneliness. He learned to stand on his own, but lost faith in family, in warmth, in love itself. He always told himself, if even my own father couldn't love me, who else ever will? Years passed and Daniel lived like a shadow. Jobs never lasted. Relationships fell apart. Friends drifted away. He became a solitary figure in a crowded city. By day, he worked just enough to cover rent and meager meals. By night, he returned to his dim room, sat under a flickering desk lamp, and drowned in silence. Sometimes he escaped to a nearby bar, numbing himself with drinks, but the emptiness always followed him home, heavier than before. It was on a rainy night, as water leaked through the roof into the attic, that Daniel found the old wooden box. He had climbed up to patch the holes, but instead stumbled upon a dust-covered chest. Small, its lock rusted, yet still intact. Inside lay a few faded keepsakes along with that envelope. The moment his hands touched the letter, a surge of emotion flooded him. Suspicion, fear, and something else. He remembered the funeral, his father's cold eyes, the lifelong hunger to be loved that was never fed. Could this letter contain the words his father never spoke? Or was it nothing more than another hollow message, cold and detached like always? The attic reeked of damp wood and mold. The dim bulb cast its tired glow, illuminating the faded ink stains on the envelope. Daniel sat on the floor, clutching it tightly, eyes locked on the paper as if he could pierce through and see the truth inside. But there was only silence. Questions tore at him. Why did my father leave this letter? Why had my mother never mentioned it? Why did it remain hidden all these years? Could it hold the explanation for a childhood starved of love? Doubt grew heavier, swallowing the room. Daniel felt he was standing at a threshold, open the letter, and face the truth, or remain forever in the prison of old wounds, without answers. In that instant, a flicker of something broke through his weariness, an ember of longing. A longing just once to hear his father's voice, even if only through words written on paper. Daniel sat frozen on the old wooden chair in the attic, the unopened letter resting before him. His hand trembled, thumb tracing the frayed edge of the envelope, as though one small act of courage could rip open every secret. Yet that trembling betrayed the truth. He was terrified. Terrified that the words inside weren't the love he'd longed for, but more commands, more cold lessons, just like the ones that had marked every corner of his childhood. In his chest, his heart pounded like a relentless hammer. Sweat gathered at his temples, sliding down, blotting the fragile paper with a fresh stain of dampness. His eyes locked on his father's handwriting, familiar, rigid, decisive. Each letter felt like a blade reopening scars of the past. He remembered all too well as a child, whenever he made the smallest mistake, spilling a glass of water, forgetting his school books. His father's thunderous voice would shake the room. You must learn to control yourself. The world out there will never forgive the weak. No embrace, no comfort, only discipline and impossible standards. As a boy, Daniel's young heart learned to shrink, to hide itself behind walls. He never dared cry in front of his father, knowing those eyes would only grow colder. The memories crashed in like a storm rain-slicked windows, the tiny desk in his childhood room, his father standing behind him, watching every word he wrote in his notebook. One mistake, and the ruler cracked against the table, its sharp sound making the boy's heart jump. In those moments, he whispered to himself, just once I wish he'd say, "Good job, son." But the words never came. Now, years later, the letter sat inches from his hands, and Daniel still couldn't be sure it carried any warmth at all. He feared it might contain nothing but cold lines, or worse, a revelation painful enough to shatter even the few fragile memories left of his father. Outside, wind rushed through the cracks, stirring the old curtain. A weak yellow glow fell across his face, deepening the shadows under his tired eyes. Daniel lifted the letter, set it down, lifted it again. Each time his chest tightened, his breath grew sharper. Behind his fear, the weight of reality pressed just as hard. 2 weeks ago, he'd lost his last job, an admin position at a small firm. The reasons: lateness, lack of focus, missed deadlines. To his coworkers, he was a failure. To himself, he was worse, useless, undeserving of anything. He had tried to love. A handful of relationships sparked, but all burned out quickly. Each woman left with the same words, "You're like a wall, Daniel. I can't reach you." And he knew they were right. He had built that wall long ago in a childhood without affection. He feared showing anyone the brokenness inside, feared rejection. So he kept people out, circling back into loneliness. Now in this attic, past and present collided, pressing down on him like a crushing weight. The letter became something both fragile and enormous, a scrap of paper yet carrying the power to shift his entire life. If these were his father's last words, they might heal wounds that had bled for decades, or they might cut deeper, proving he had never been loved. He leaned back, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Rain pattered steadily on the roof, each drop echoing like a question. Open it or don't face it or run. Face it. His heartbeat followed the rhythm of the storm, fast, slow, then racing again. At one point he bent forward, forehead resting against the letter. The rough paper scraped his skin like an old wound. He closed his eyes, and there was his father again, tall frame in a military uniform, stride, firm gaze, stern. But this time in Daniel's mind, his father's lips moved as if to speak something unspoken. Daniel jerked upright, breath ragged. The letter was still there, unmoved. He clenched it tight as though gripping the weight of his entire past. These days, his life had slipped further into ruin. Rent was due, his bank account nearly empty. His phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls. The apartment was cold by day, pitch black by night, the only light a tired desk lamp. It was as if the letter itself was the only thing left speaking to him. Deep down, he knew he couldn't hide forever. A part of him longed desperately to hear words of love from his father. Another part dreaded that opening it would destroy that last hope. He feared the truth, but feared the silence just as much. Time felt frozen. His hand shook as he picked up the letter opener, set it down, picked it up again, over and over. Each time the blade touched the seam, his heart raced faster, his throat closed tighter. Outside, night had fallen. Streetlights cast pale light through the window, streaking his face with shadow. In his eyes burned the conflict, half fleeing, half aching for the answer. And in that moment, the audience could feel it all, the pain, the loneliness, the hunger of a son who had lost his father too soon. A son who had never heard words of love, now staring down the final letter, the only chance left to know what his father truly felt. The tension coiled tighter, heavier. Daniel sat unmoving, the letter unopened. But that hesitation itself became the hidden climax, a man trapped between the scars of his past and the emptiness of his present, unable to decide whether to face the truth or keep living in the dark. The attic drowned in silence. Only rain and the pounding of his heart remained. And with him, the audience waited for the inevitable moment when the blade would finally tear the envelope open, releasing words that could change everything. The attic was bathed in the weak yellow glow of a single desk lamp, like a fragile flame fighting against the heavy dark pressing in from all sides. Daniel sat there motionless, clutching the envelope as though it were both sacred and dangerous. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Hours had passed since he'd discovered the letter, yet it remained sealed untouched. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the breath out slow. In that instant, memories surged from his childhood. His father's stern gaze, the cold tone of his voice, the oppressive silence of their nights at home. And the funeral, standing beside the coffin, his trembling hand wanting to reach out, but stopping short. That day he believed he would never again hear his father's voice, and yet here it was within reach, disguised as a letter. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. Daniel opened his eyes, staring at the envelope. Then with a new resolve, he reached for the letter opener lying on the desk. The blade caught the light, flashing a cold gleam. Time seemed to slow. His hand pressed the edge of steel against the brittle seam. A sharp shh split the silence, the sound of paper tearing small yet thunderous in the still room. To Daniel, it roared like thunder, shaking every nerve. He froze for a heartbeat, hands suspended mid-air as though another stroke of the blade might shatter his entire world. The lamp flickered, shadows leaping across the room, painting his pale, tense face in fractured light. Finally, he drew the blade the rest of the way. The paper ripped clean, the sound crisp and final, tearing through the silence. The envelope sagged open, revealing a folded sheet inside, yellowed with age, corners curled and frayed. Daniel swallowed hard. 2 fingers slid the paper free, lifting it slowly. The faint crackle of the sheet was the sound of the past awakening from its long sleep. He set the envelope aside and raised the letter to eye level. The handwriting was unmistakable, his father's. Steady but marked by occasional tremors, as if written by a man fighting illness or exhaustion. Daniel's heart pounded harder, his chest tight with pain. He lowered his eyes to the first line. "My son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you." The words didn't just echo in his mind. They seemed to carry his father's voice, deep, gravelly. but this time softened in a way Daniel had never heard before. His eyes widened. His breath caught in his throat. A wave of emotion crashed over him, nearly overwhelming. His hand gripped this paper so tightly the edges crumpled. He hovered on the edge, torn between rushing ahead to devour every word and stopping forever in this moment of suspense. Because if he read further, he might discover truths that could either heal him or break him beyond repair. But in the flickering glow of the lamp, Daniel shut his eyes, drew in one final breath, and whispered, "Enough. I've waited too long." He opened his eyes and continued to read. Line by line, the words pulled him deeper into a journey he could no longer escape, a journey into truth, into the past, and into a love he had never once heard spoken aloud. And in that moment, the audience could see it clearly, the shift in him. From a son running from memory, Daniel had chosen to face it. And with that choice, the story turned a page where old wounds would be exposed, and hope at last might find room to breathe again. Daniel sat frozen, his eyes locked on the trembling lines stretched across the page. The pale glow of the desk lamp flickered, casting his shadow long and distorted against the wooden floor, like his very soul twisted in this moment. Outside, the wind hissed through the cracks, the thin curtain fluttering with a soft rustle, an eerie soundtrack to his solitude. In that space, only the ticking clock remained, each beat hammering home every word his eyes consumed. "My son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. I've left this world carrying too many words unspoken, too many feelings I never dared to show. This letter is my only chance to be with you again, even if only through these lines." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tightening, his vision blurred, lashes trembling. He had never once heard his father speak this way. In all his childhood years, his father had never let a crack show in that hard exterior. Yet here, in trembling ink, the man admitted to the silence, to the absence that had scarred them both. His hands shook violently as he gripped the page. His father's voice filled his head low, raspy, heavy with regret. "Gee, son. You may have thought of me as a cruel man barking orders, never smiling at you. I know I hurt you with my severity. You must understand something, I never hated you. On the contrary, I loved you more than anything, but I didn't know how to show it. I grew up in a world of hardness. The military life itself had taught me that weakness was failure. I feared that if I was gentle with you, the world would break you. So I chose to be strict, too strict. And in doing so, I lost the chance to hold you, to tell you that you were the greatest pride of my life." Daniel bowed his head, tears spilling onto the page, blotting the faded ink. In his mind, the stone-faced father dissolved, replaced by a man drowning in unspoken love, crippled by his own silence. "What I regret most," the letter went on, "is that I never once said 3 simple words, 'I love you.' I thought you would understand. I thought you would see it in my eyes, hidden in my discipline. But I was wrong. Love must be spoken. It must be touched. It cannot live in silence. If I could turn back time, I would not choose silence again. I would sit beside you, hold you close, and say, 'You are the greatest gift I was ever given.' But life doesn't grant second chances. All I have left are these words, hoping you will forgive me." By now, Daniel was sobbing, shoulders shaking violently. Years of pain, years of hunger for a single embrace, a single word, all of it erupted in that attic. His tears blurred the ink, smudging father and son into one shared grief. "My son," the letter closed, "I don't leave you with apologies, but with a lesson. True strength is not hiding fear. It is facing it. Live with courage. Dare to love. Dare to fail. Dare to hurt. And still rise again. Don't let fear imprison you the way it imprisoned me. You are my pride, not because you are perfect, not because you are strong, but because you are my son. That alone has always been enough." The letter opener slipped from Daniel's hand, clattering against the wood. He collapsed forward, face in his hands, crying like a child. Every wall he had built around his heart cracked and crumbled. For the first time he heard it, the words he had longed for all his life. His father loved him. His father was proud of him. The tiny flame of the lamp trembled with his sobs. The ticking of the clock no longer pressed like a burden, but pulsed like release. The attic became a stage for grief and liberation, his body shaking, tears staining the boards beneath him. Lifting his head, Daniel gazed out the small window. The night was vast and black, but far in the distance the glow of streetlights shimmered like beacons. For the first time he felt his father's presence beside him, hand on his shoulder, whispering, "You are not alone." You never were. A raw cry tore from his chest, echoing through the attic. Not a cry of despair, but of release. Years of silence gave way to sound, to healing. Clutching the letter tight against his chest, Daniel whispered between broken breaths, "I love you too, Dad. I love you." And in that moment, the world seemed to pause. Only the sound of a heart beating remained steady, now sinking with the trembling glow of the lamp. A soul once caged had finally been set free. The attic still carried the musty scent of dust, the faint whistle of wind slipping through the window cracks. Yet inside Daniel, something had shifted. The tears on his cheeks had dried, leaving behind salty streaks, but deep in his chest, a weight had lifted. He sat there for a long while, clutching the letter as if letting go would make everything vanish. For years he had lived with a quiet fury, angry at his father for never loving him, angry at himself for never being enough to earn that love. That anger had become invisible chains dragging him through his youth and exhaustion. But now, with those trembling words, his father's confession, his hidden love, the chains had finally broken. Daniel drew in a long breath. The night air was still damp and cold, but inside him the breath felt different. Open light, unburdened. His eyes were still swollen and red, yet somewhere within them flickered a new light peace. He folded the letter with care, slid it into his worn leather wallet. His finger traced the crease as though carving a vow into his soul. From today, this will be my compass. He knew the world outside was still harsh failure, and loneliness would still be waiting at the corners. But unlike before, he now had an anchor, his father's silent love, and the certainty that he was never abandoned. Daniel rose to his feet. Somehow the cramped attic felt wider, brighter. The weak glow of the desk lamp was enough now to light his face, tear-stained, but with the faintest smile. For the first time in years, he found himself smiling. As he stepped down the old staircase, his father's words rang in his mind. Live with courage. Don't let fear imprison you. You are my greatest pride. Each word pressed deeper into his heart, rewriting years of self-doubt. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the living room window, staring out into the stillness. Far in the distance, the streetlights flickered faintly. He realized the dark wasn't something to fear anymore. Darkness was only the canvas that made the light shine brighter. And when dawn broke across the horizon, Daniel felt his heart rise with it. The eastern sky bloomed orange, then gold, then soft pink. Light spilled into the small room, sweeping away every shadow. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The morning wind brushed his messy hair, carrying the earthy scent of wet ground, the freshness of grass and flowers. He breathed in deeply, chest swelling with life. Eyes closed, he whispered, "I'll live differently now, Dad. I won't let fear hold me back anymore." A seed of decision had taken root. He would start over, maybe with a new job, a new relationship, or simply a new way of seeing his life. But what mattered most, he was no longer the same man, no longer bound by anger or emptiness. He had been healed. He pulled out his wallet, gazed at the folded letter inside. The paper was old, the ink fading, but to him it was treasure. Pressing the wallet against his chest, he felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. This will be my compass, he told himself. Wherever I go, whatever I face, I'll remember his words. The sun broke over the horizon, pouring golden light across Daniel's face. His swollen eyes gleamed with something new, hope. A final tear rolled down his cheek, but this time it wasn't born of sorrow. It was gratitude. Sometimes love is never spoken, but it waits silent, patient, until the day we are brave enough to see it. Don't wait until it's too late to speak the words your heart longs to say. Cherish those you love while they're still here. Daniel stepped out onto the misty morning road, his footsteps steady, his face brightened with resolve. He lifted his gaze toward the rising sun, his eyes reflecting new faith. And a final voiceover whispered, closing his journey of pain and renewal. Say what your heart longs to say before it's too late. The screen faded to black, leaving only the sound of a steady heartbeat. The rhythm of life, of love, finally found. The light of dawn still lingered on Daniel's face as he walked down the narrow road, carrying the letter like a piece of his soul newly reborn. His journey ended in healing, but it also opened a larger door. A door for us to look back at our own lives. Have you ever felt that ache, the longing for a simple word that never came? Have you ever regretted not saying to a loved one, "I love you, Dad," or "I miss you, Mom," or even just a quiet, "Thank you for always being there for me before it was too late"? Daniel's story is not only about a letter, it is a reminder for all of us. Love doesn't always speak in words, but it is always there, silent, steady, deep. The question is, do we have the courage to recognize it, to speak it, and to give it before time runs out? If you've ever lived through a moment like this, share it in the comments. Your story might be the comfort, the hope someone out there needs right now. If this video touched your heart, hit like so others can discover it too. And if you want to keep walking with us to hear more stories of healing and inspiration, don't forget to subscribe. Every subscription is a spark that keeps us telling stories that stir the soul. Before the screen fades to black, a warm voiceover leaves one final message. Do you dare to speak the words your heart has kept hidden? Do you believe that a single sentence could change someone's life? Leave your answer in the comments. And remember, speak it before it's too late. The screen slowly darkens, leaving only the glowing subscribe button and the faint sound of a heartbeat. the echo of a lesson that will never grow old.